Outer Wilds is not a video game. Not in the traditional sense of that phrase. Video games, obviously, aren't a single sort of thing. The rules which binds video games in particular, or games more generally, are somewhat loose. Some protest that games need meaningful interactivity, but then the question becomes, well, what is meaningful? Some swear up and down that games need win and lose states, which are either implicit or explicit, but then once again the discussion becomes about what is a win or a lose state, either implicit or explicit. Outer Wilds, despite being an exceptional case in not being a video game, doesn't flaunt these rules. Outer Wilds, instead, is perfectly in line with what one may assume video games to be in the most common sense. Anyone who looks at Outer Wilds that is familiar with what most people mean by a video game would believe it falls within that category. But Outer Wilds is exceptional, not because it isn't within what people consider a video game, but because it is the video game. It is the video game in the sense that it so perfectly and flawlessly embodies what video games could be, or what the idea of the video game means in its simplest, most intuitive sense. And yet, in spite of that, it is remarkable in near every aspect. I'm not going to discuss any particular mechanics or narrative beats in this short piece. I won't even show a speck of gameplay footage. I won't say anything other than you ought to play Outer Wilds if you have any interest in what the video game is or could be. I could spend hundreds of words expounding upon why I think this is the case, which I have done to my friends at Links Over Drinks before. I've blown off work to get stuck into discussions on this very subject of Outer Wilds being the video game in exacting detail. I have enough thoughts in my mind to write something not only of substance but of volume, but I simply don't think it is right. It is not my place nor duty to explain why. Outer Wilds is a thing as the video game is my argument. It is my thesis. It is itself, and what it is the video game. No other game which has tried to tackle Outer Wilds' pitch has ever even come close to it. And it's because really, the pitch is not one which easily makes a video game. It requires an exceptional amount of creative thinking and is the kind of thing which could only really be thought of in the way which it ended up being. Outer Wilds, at one point, before it was a twinkle in the creator's eyes, a full-bodied concept, was a series of little ideas or toys or experiments or points, all of them interesting and awkward, but none of them video games in the traditional sense, not in the sense that Outer Wilds is the video game. But eventually, with time, it became something which not only fused these little disparate strands of stuff together, but also shaped the points that originally existed into a body, into a whole. The best review I have found, in many ways, is not actually a review, and it's definitely not a critique, but it's something kind of different. In 2019, Daniel Hardcastle, also known as Nerdcubed in his video The Nerdcubed Awards 2019, gave Outer Wilds his award of Game of the Year. In the roughly 4.5 minutes of the video where he discusses the game, he talks mostly about one thing, and that is the way that media, not games, but media, failed to grasp the central subject of Outer Wilds, the thing that the game is most focused on the image of. He talks to the specific failings of other media in its understanding of the scope, the feeling, the shape, the image, and the desire of the subject. The award isn't a review in the sense of considering the game as a consumer product, nor is it a critique in the sense that it does not attempt to disassemble the work for critical analysis, but in failing to do both of those things, whilst falling into a similar role to them, it embodies one thing flawlessly. Daniel's words instead paint a picture of the game. They illustrate the bright supernova of an experience which the game is, that shines brighter than anything else ever has before, and maybe ever will again beyond it. But despite the brilliance on display, it happens a single time, in that specific form, in that specific time, in that specific place, and then it's gone. Despite any attempts to repeat it or recapture the moment, they're mere facsimiles. The thing it was for me, and will be for you, or maybe was for you, and will certainly never be again for either of us, is flawlessly held in stasis for a single, shining, beautiful moment, in Daniel's words. Outer Wilds is the video game because of the way it manages to embody what games most certainly are. It is a full realization of the positive traits of the video game, but in the spirit of the game, it never actually declares what games can't be. It, much like Daniel's review, is not concerned with defining itself in the typical sense. Instead, it chooses to be a thing, the thing that it is exactly. And it is simply that, in a pure sense.